Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. I'm in a great mood today. Obviously fun on a Friday. We've got a gigantic show planned. It's Jake Fromm before we're all said and done. Jake had some interesting stuff to say about a Georgia player in particular that could be kind of on his way for a breakout season. We'll get to that here coming up in just a little bit. That's going to be a good time today. Obviously, we're looking heavily at UGA recruiting with the announcement on Saturday for KJ Bolden, Sunday for Nate Frazier, and then everything else kind of after that. Jeff Sentell will help us out with all of that. And Javon Bullard has said one of my favorite things of all time, because I believe fully, finally, completely, Javon Bullard has brought an end to one of the most annoying off-season debates we could have ever possibly had. You thought the stuff after Alabama got beat in 2021 was bad? Ohio State's made it far worse, but now it's over and done. Javon Bullard has thrown the knockout punch, something that he's done before, by the way. So let's go ahead and get it all started. We're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
By now, you've probably seen this. Javon Bullard had a great thing to say yesterday as Georgia fall camp got started, kind of putting to an end, hopefully fully, finally, and completely, one of the more annoying offseason conversations you could have ever had. I regret going back in time on this kind of stuff too much, but if you want to understand how great what Javon Bullard said yesterday, and by the way, Javon Bullard's just great, period. MVP level player for Georgia's postseason games a year ago, now kind of sliding, we think, from the nickelback star position over to safety. We believe immediately he kind of becomes one of the best safeties in the entire country just for making that switch. So top player, but also a key leader here for Georgia, and a guy that kind of throws the zinger right when you need it most, kind of silencing one of the most annoying competitors that Georgia's ever been forced to kind of do battle with when it comes to the Ohio State Buckeyes. So for some context here, Ohio State is still very much, as the saying goes, all up in their feelings about what happened near the end of the Peach Bowl back in December on New Year's Eve, when Javon Bullard made a good football play, clean hit to separate wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., who we honestly think is an outstanding player, one of the best in the country, maybe not as good as Brock Bowers, but still really very good. We think that Harrison's sensational, but on this particular moment, in this particular game, Bullard just simply got the better of him, gave him a nice, strong, clean hit. Harrison could not hold on to the football. And unfortunately, and you hate when this happens, and I do truly hate when this happens to any player, Harrison got hurt on the play. And ever since then, maybe Ohio State, the Big Ten folks, not quite being as comfortable with the physical style of play that really defines the SEC. Ever since then, the Ohio State folks have kind of thought that the play on Bullard should have been targeting. And part of the confusion there is the Pac-12 refs that day, back when that league still had a chance of surviving, the Pac-12 refs initially did call the play targeting. They're also probably confused there as well, because if the Big Ten doesn't know the SEC's physicality, the Pac-12 definitely doesn't know the SEC's physicality. So you've got a team from the Big Ten, some officials from the Pac-12. It took them a second looking on replay to realize that while Bullard hit Harrison very hard, you can't penalize him just for playing too rough. It was a hit below the shoulder. It was Bullard leading with his shoulder. It's a good football play. That's what replay showed. But since replay didn't validate Ryan Day's feelings, Ryan Day has been out saying, well, maybe we need to do away with replay. If replay doesn't feel good about me, make me feel good about me, if replay doesn't validate my feelings, if replay introduced some facts that are uncomfortable for me, then maybe we just need to get rid of replay. Day said that the other day. Here's a reminder of Ryan Day and some of the whining that's been going on during this offseason.
We're getting so much into the weeds on this that we've lost where we started on it. And what was the reason why we did this? To protect young men. Mm-hmm. And so, if someone's launching at somebody's head and they're unconscious on the ground, that's not what we want here. And so I think sometimes, we get into these slow motion things and we start to get so, caught up in the little details of everything. And it's not realistic sometimes watching it in slow motion. So I think there has to be some sort of a common sense. I think we have to still trust the referees on the field and what they see. They're there for a reason. And then if it's egregious, one way or the other, then that's where the instant replay comes into play. But I think right now what we've done is we've just put so much into the instant replay that what you see in, a slow frame isn't really what's going on in the field. And we have to go back to the common sense and why the rules even put into place.
I've said this before, a preference for politeness is not going to cause me to pretend that I have a level of respect for Ryan Day. I don't. That's simply one of the most embarrassing things you'll ever hear a coach say, that somehow slow motion replay is problematic because it doesn't validate Day's prior assumptions about something. If replay shows him some facts that his feelings can't handle, the facts need to be ignored. That's conduct unbecoming a coach of the stature of someone who should be leading Ohio State. That's embarrassing by Ryan Day, although I don't know that he has the capacity to feel shame. And unfortunately, teams take on the personality of their coaches. You know this, that whatever a coach either leads in the direction of or chooses to tolerate, that's the way the player's going to behave there as well. And while I don't have much respect for Day, I've got bukus of respect for Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a truly great player. My guess is he'll make, as I've told you before, $100 million or something like that in the NFL. This seems to be the kind of guy who thrives on Sundays, and he's obviously thriving on Saturdays. But unfortunately, even an alpha dog receiver like Harrison sort of sounds like the kind of whiny wimp that Ryan Day is when he gets a chance to talk about this subject, because even Marvin Harrison Jr. has been sort of left to kind of make excuses for how come Ohio State couldn't hold on to its lead and still win the game against Georgia on New Year's Eve. Harrison comes across no better than Ryan Day based on some of the things that he said during the offseason. One more reminder of that for full context for everything that's going on here.
Do you guys feel like you maybe let one get away against Georgia?
Yeah, we did. I think it came down to a couple of plays here and there towards the end of the game. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to play in that fourth quarter.
If you had played, would it have been a different story in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I think we go on to win that game against Georgia, and I like our chances in the national championship.
I said this the other day. So Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh recently said that he thinks he's going to have 20 players drafted in the upcoming NFL draft, which is just an absolutely asinine thing to say. But I'll take a hot take over something that could happen in the future 100 times out of 100 over a hot take about some sort of hypothetical from the past that we'll never know. Marvin Harrison says, listen, if I hadn't gotten hurt, we would have won that game. That's the sort of meaningless, worthless bluster that people want to throw around sometimes, some sort of hot take about some sort of hypothetical from the past that can never be proven. I think Harbaugh's statement about having 20 guys get drafted is one of the dumber things you'll ever hear a coach say. Clearly that's a remote long shot at best, but come April, we'll know one way or another whether he was right or wrong. In the case of Harrison, we can never know for sure. All we do know is it sounds like an excuse because what Ohio State didn't do was actually win the game that was played this past New Year's Eve, despite the fact they had a couple touchdown lead, despite the fact they had the ball at the end of the game, and Day kind of turtled up as a head coach and a play caller in terms of the plays that he called, settled for the 50-yard field goal, kicker kicked it sideways, and then after that the ball dropped. It was 2023, and we've been celebrating ever since. That's what we know happened in reality, no matter what kind of hypothetical things that Harrison thinks could have happened had he not gotten hurt in the game, had Javon Bullard not played so rough. So that's the context here. You're aware of all of that. Then yesterday, Javon Bullard got a chance to speak on behalf of the Georgia Bulldogs as Georgia Georgia fall camp begins to get ready for the 2023 season. And our own Mike Griffith, I guess, was the one that asked the question to Javon Bullard of, what do you think about all this? Ohio State's still talking about it. Ryan Day, Marvin Harrison Jr., everybody up there in Columbus is still talking about the idea that Bullard made the defensive play of the game to separate Harrison from the football, and unfortunately Harrison got hurt on all of that. And Javon Bullard, who has said so many wise things over the course of his time at Georgia, maybe he said the wisest thing that he's ever said of all. Certainly if you're a Georgia fan, you love all of this, because after Bullard said what he said, there is no more room for any Ohio State whining about anything ever again on any of this topic. And from that standpoint, Bullard is doing the Lord's work. This is what Javon Bullard said yesterday via Connor Riley, who videoed this. This is what Javon Bullard said yesterday about the fact that Ohio State will not shut up about the Peach Bowl. This is the hero of the game, Javon Bullard.
I'm going to be honest, that play happened in December. You still talking about it, that's really not my fault. We moved on from that. We played a game after that. We're going into another season. That play's over, man. To be honest, I don't really have too much to say about that. It's over, it's done with. We're looking on and preparing ourselves to camp.
Let me ask you an honest question. If you're a Georgia fan, I'm assuming you are, could you like Javon Bullard more than you already do? I mean, seriously, Could you like him more than you already do? This is an absolute alpha on the football field and clearly a wise sage off the field there as well. I love what he says. He says, if you're still talking about that play, at this point in time, that's not my fault. Like, if that's still the kind of thing that's keeping you up at night or the first thing you think about when you wake up in the morning, if you're still talking about this, that's no longer my responsibility. That's sort of on you to decide if you're going to move on from this or not. That's sort of your responsibility here right now. And Javon Bullard could not be more right about that. I'd like to personally extend a thank you to him for ending what has been one of the dumbest offseason narratives that we've ever been forced to endure. The nonstop, incessant whining from Ohio State. And after Bullard said what he said yesterday, there is simply no more room for that. Javon Bullard gets the last word on that for sure. Now, to shift gears and talk about something completely different for a moment. Tomorrow, pretty big day around DawgNation as 5-star athlete KJ Bolden gets ready to make his commitment decision. Now, I got to give KJ a little bit of credit for something, and I'm not being funny or sarcastic or whatever else. KJ has made this feel like an event, and I know that's a little bit of a turnoff for some people. Some people don't like drama in recruiting. I've said a million times, I've got a very high tolerance for drama pre-National Signing Day. When you're leading up to all of this, I am fine with you kind of doing whatever theatrics you want to do because, honestly, my Saturday, tomorrow, it's like 2 weeks before the start of the high school season, slightly less than a month before the start of the college season. My Saturday in kind of early August would be relatively boring, I don't even know what I'd be doing if not for this. All of a sudden, tomorrow night, I believe it's a 7:30 p.m. announcement. We'll be obviously live on video covering all of this. But even apart from like the work part of this, I'm just interested to hear what Bolden says. There's something about an announcement that's interesting, whether it's the commissioner reading a draft pick or a recruit, choosing a school. There's just something really interesting about an announcement. I'm doing this. I'm going to this school, or so-and-so is drafting so-and-so player. In sports, we just make a big deal about announcements. And tomorrow, Bolden is going to make his announcement. We've covered lots of recruiting announcements around DawgNation over the years, but I don't know how many of them feel as interesting as this does. And no disrespect to KJ, who's obviously an outstanding player. I don't know that the impact on the field for Georgia kind of matches the interest in the decision. And from that standpoint, you have to sort of credit KJ as a little bit of a showman here. We said this going back the other day that he's done a really good job of making Georgia feel like they're in it, making Florida State feel like it's in it, making Auburn certainly feel like it is in it. He's done a really good job of kind of adding to the mystery and the intrigue when he had the interview with Jeff the other day. We'll hear from Jeff Sentell, of course, live about this in a moment, but, he kind of dropped some nuggets that made you think, ooh, maybe he's going one way or maybe he's going another. And that's kind of before the Big Cat weekend when Auburn supposedly got involved in all of this. I guess by way of news here, and I know that Jeff's going to have some new stories with the KJ Bolden camp that's going to be going up at DawgNation.com both today and this weekend leading into the announcement tomorrow night. But I saw where last night, I think it was yesterday, Bolden did an interview with 24/7 Sports, and a couple of things from the interview. I don't have the audio or anything to play for you, but I'm sure you can find it if you want to check that out. I guess the most important piece of news that I saw that came out of the interview was Bolden said that he had never been silently committed anywhere, that there'd been some chatter about that, and obviously if you're a Georgia fan, maybe at one point in time you thought Bolden was a silent commitment to you. According to Bolden's own words, he said he had never been silently committed anywhere, and only, I guess it would have been yesterday, only that particular day, meaning Thursday, only that particular day did Bolden decide where he wanted to make his college decision. So apparently, according to KJ, that decision was made yesterday and it had never been made at any point in time prior to that. Now, is that slightly contradictory compared to what he said the other day when he kind of thought his mind was made up, then a coach changed his mind? Maybe so, but let's not ruin a good story here. It sort of seems like that Bolden has made a final decision, and he says that's the only decision he's ever made, although last week sort of said some different stuff, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. The point is there's still a lot of interest and intrigue in what Bolden's going to do. There was clearly some talk about Auburn. I guess the guy that asked the questions is an Auburn reporter, so there's a little bit of an Auburn lean on this particular discussion. Clearly, Bolden had a good time at Big Cat last weekend when the receiver flipped from Alabama to Auburn. That was something that was really fun and exciting for Bolden to be a part of. And listen, I mean, you get that, right? You're around campus. There's a lot of energy around something like that, and you have the notion of the visit high exists for a reason, and maybe that's all that was, or maybe it's a precursor to a commitment. I guess we'll find out on Saturday. But clearly, Bolden said some good things about his time at Auburn, and he also, kind of alluded to what has been kind of kicked around in the recruiting process before, which is at one point in time, Florida State would have been viewed as a dream school by KJ Bolden. That came up in this discussion there as well. Ultimately, why do Georgia fans feel good about Bolden? Because Bolden's been to Georgia so much, because Kirby Smart himself, the head coach, has been such a key and central figure in this recruitment the entire time. So there you have it. A lot of schools have reason to feel like they have a shot at this, and you'll credit KJ Bolden for building a lot of interest in his decision. Probably the recruitment continues beyond tomorrow no matter what happens, but in terms of kind of like old school, mysterious recruiting, soap opera style drama, we got some tomorrow night, and I have to confess, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and we are happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, but we start even earlier than that, 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. That's a special extra piece of content we give to those who watch our show on our own platform. We just love doing all of that. Really appreciate all of you being a part of the program there as well. Even if you listen on the radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or as a podcast, Apple, Spotify, worldfamous DawgNation.com. Lots of ways to connect. We're obviously well past now 2,000 shows, working on our next 2,000. So we appreciate all the kind words here this week as we just show up every day and try to do our work. And hopefully people respond in a positive way. And we certainly appreciate all of you who've made the show part of your life, whether it's something you've just recently started doing, been doing for a long time. We really appreciate all of that. Of course, the show today brought to you by Kroger. Now, later on in the show, we'll kind of give a shout-out to Kroger here in a little bit about it as it relates to Kroger Chef Jr. I'm going to do that with Jake Fromm when he's on the show here in a little bit, our conversation and a reminder about the fun stuff coming up with Kroger Chef Jr. For now, though, let me remind you that you've got one final day. Today is the last day to get in on our DawgNation Celebrating Outstanding Teachers contest, courtesy of Kroger. My kids have been back to school for a couple of days. Other folks kind of going back to school here right now. So I want to make sure you know that today is the absolute last day to make your nomination. And next week, once per day for the entirety of the week, we're going to be announcing a wonderful teacher and celebrating that teacher, courtesy of our friends at Kroger, because Kroger loves our communities kind of getting back to school and all the energy and the excitement that exists around a brand new school year and the great teachers who make that true and make all of that possible. And we want to acknowledge, I wish we could acknowledge all of them. I wish we could just do a big roll call of all the great teachers in kind of our listening audience area here, but we can at least do this for 5 next week, once a day next week, celebrating an outstanding teacher courtesy of Kroger. And every one of those outstanding teachers is going to get a collection of 4 terrific gift cards. $100 to Kroger, $50 to Home Chef and Bath and Body Works and Target. So it's a really cool, collection of gift cards to kind of help you with your, back to school needs or kind of the stuff you need for your family, because we know as the teachers get back to school, that's always a tough transition for the families of those teachers who, maybe you have to kind of sort of make, that process as smooth as it possibly can be. So Kroger understands all that there as well. And here's the cool thing there as well. In order to find out about these great teachers, we need a nomination from you in order to be able to do that. And if you nominate one of the teachers that ends up being our outstanding teacher winner, courtesy of Kroger, you yourself get to be a winner there as well. You'll get a $50 Kroger gift card, and you'll get a DawgNation gift bag, which includes T-shirt, all kinds of really cool stuff like that. So that's our prize going in the direction of our nominators, those who nominate the teachers that end up winning. And as I said before, the teachers that we announce next week, courtesy of Kroger, get 4 outstanding gift cards. So make sure you check out all of that. DawgNation.com for more details and to nominate an outstanding teacher, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. All right, so that's that. Looking forward to a lot of fun. As I said before, we'll have Jake Fromm on the show a little bit later on. Fun conversation with Jake. We actually recorded this yesterday. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Jake Fromm. Jake is just one of the best guys that you'll ever meet, because Jake is in the middle of NFL training camp, and they're getting ready for their first preseason game next week. They're obviously practicing out there, and Jake's just in the middle of all of that, and he still takes time to join us here on DawgNation Daily, which I am so thankful for. So really good stuff from Jake today on a couple of fronts. Yesterday at DawgNation.com, Connor Raleigh had a wonderful practice report up from what happened there, and you should go to DawgNation.com. You should seek it out, and you should read it. Connor's really good at the practice report. I think all of us in life have things that we're good at. I am not good at practice report stuff. That's not one of my strengths necessarily. When I'm standing out there at practice, it feels like 1,000 things are happening at once, and kind of chronicling it in a way that I can come back and tell you is not always. It's just not always my strength necessarily. Hopefully I have strengths. That's not one of mine. But Connor is good at the practice report, so you should read it online at DawgNation.com. And one of the things that Connor had in his piece was a positive update on the early kind of development of Dominic Lovett, the transfer wide receiver in the Georgia offense. And so with that in mind, I talked to Jake yesterday in the recording that you'll see in a moment about Dominic Lovett. And Jake had some really good things to say about that. And Jake had some special insight on the Georgia quarterback situation from a guy who has actually been a part of a Georgia quarterback competition. This is new information, new stuff from Jake. We'll get that before we're done today. Can't wait for that as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take. And we'll also get Jeff Sentell here in a moment there as well on the subject of UGA recruiting. That's all on the way here over the course of the next couple of minutes. For now, though, I want to go around the doghouse, and it's poured today by our friends at the Finish Long Drink. And boy, we always love that Finish Long Drink as we kind of roll into a weekend. And speaking of the start of Georgia fall camp and kind of what's going on there, the evaluation of various position groups, I thought that Kirby Smart had something interesting to say about the running back spot. And this is where I might be a little bit guilty. I'm going to let you judge for yourself. And if you think this is true, you can tell me. And I will be more than happy to hear your feedback on that. I may be a little guilty here of reading into something that Kirby Smart says. But sometimes when Kirby Smart wants to praise something, he's more than happy to do it. Jake's actually going to talk about that here in a little bit too. The willingness to kind of sort of say what he's saying and not always keep his cards as close to the vest as you might think. But when Kirby Smart kind of withholds some of that, I think that's also noticeable as well. Sometimes that's the dog that doesn't bark. And I think you kind of got some of that from Kirby Smart yesterday, maybe. Kirby was asked to kind of evaluate the running back spot, particular the emergence of Dajon Edwards, the development of a pass-catching threat. We've said this over and over, that you go back and look at the best Georgia offenses in the Smart era, it's James Cook catching the football. It's Kenny McIntosh catching the football. It's Sony Michel catching the football. It's a lot of guys catching the ball out of the backfield. So we've said it's important to kind of figure out who that guy is going to be for Georgia. So Kirby was kind of asked about the running back spot, generally speaking, with those two specific ideas kind of entered into it. The next step for Edwards kind of coming back from injury. Next step in trying to find a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield, something that Georgia historically has really wanted to do with the Kirby Smart offenses. Kirby kind of gave you a kind of a full-fledged answer on this. Listen to what you do hear, and do me a favor. Listen here for a moment about what you don't hear, and tell me if you think this is as noticeable as I do. Kirby on running backs from earlier this week.
I think Andrew coming off the knee is where is he in terms of like catching the ball, stamina, burst, acceleration. Branson, when can we get him back? Obviously, Kendall and Dajon have the most experience. A guy who had a great offseason and put up really good numbers in the weight room is Cash. You know, Cash is maybe our fastest back, pound for pound. He may be the strongest guy on the team, and his unique ability is to catch the ball out of the backfield. But Dajon has got to be a guy that is consistent, stays healthy, durable. And be kind of he and Kendall both be the leader of that group in terms of the way they work, catch the ball out of the backfield. I'm just excited to see all those guys work. I don't know that we have a superstar in the group. We've got a group that by committee does a tremendous job, and they work really hard, and they put the team first. All those guys play on special teams, and they've been a huge help for our special teams units.
So let me tell you what I hear, and you tell me, BA, or you're all wet on this, which is totally fine. I hear Kirby Smart talk about being excited, but what he says is, I'm excited to see them work. He didn't say, I'm excited to see them play. I'm excited for y'all to see him about his running back room. He says, I'm excited to see them work. I'm excited to see them. And three things that he wants to see from his collection of running backs: being more consistent, being more durable, and really being strong leaders. And that's not me saying those guys don't have that or won't do that or whatever else. I'm not trying to come across this from like a negative way, but to me, I sort of take that statement from Kirby Smart about his running backs as a little bit of a challenge. I sort of feel like Kirby Smart sort of holding back on a level of praise that he could give the scholarship guys in that particular discussion. as a way of saying, I want to see a little bit more work from these guys in terms of establishing the sort of things I think I need to see. If you want to be the target we throw to out of the backfield, then show me this, then show me this, then show me this, and maybe you can be what Kenny was a year ago, what James Cook became kind of a historic figure for doing at Georgia before that, and goodness knows Sonny Michel is, everybody's top shelf for what he did prior to that. You want to be the next in line on that? Then show me you can be consistent. Show me you can be durable. Show me you can be a leader in that room the way that maybe other running backs are. And so the Cash Jones part of this, maybe this should just be taken at face value. Cash Jones may be the next Ladd McConkey or Javon Bullard or even kind of like A.D. Mitchell before that, sort of unheralded guy who became a real strong contributing player on the team. Maybe that's what Cash Jones is. Gosh knows, even on a team that's got 1,000 4 and 5 stars, there's also room for the walk-on or the unheralded prospect or whatever else. I mean, Georgia gives all these guys a shot to show what they're about, and if you're good enough, you're going to be on the field no matter what your recruiting accolades were or the absence of those recruiting accolades. Maybe Cash Jones is just the next version of that. It's at least a possibility, because if Kirby says you're the strongest guy on the team pound for pound, and also maybe the fastest of the running backs, whatever it was he said, fastest running back, one of the stronger guys on the team. Well, gosh, that sounds like a guy they probably should be playing if that be the case. So maybe that's the truth for Cash Jones. Maybe he's going to be the running back that Georgia plays, and they throw to him out of the backfield, and he's the next version of this sort of unheralded guy who ends up being a really valuable contributor for UGA. We've had those on both sides of the ball now going back a number of years. Maybe Cash Jones is that. Or maybe the praise for Cash Jones kind of comes as a way of also kind of lighting the fire on that running back room to, show me what you're about, show me what you can give me. Because let's face it, you go back to G-Day, this was the group we probably saw the least of. And that's nobody's fault, I don't think. I really don't think that's the case. But it's the one position group that we left spring practice either giving an I don't know to, a big question mark to, maybe an incomplete to. We just didn't know. And I think that Kirby Smart, in what he's telling you there, if my reading between the lines is fair here, I think what he's telling you is I still don't know. And I'm still looking to see how those guys work, how they develop. And apparently he says, hey, Cash Jones setting kind of a high standard right now. Can the scholarship guys in that room, can they move above that standard? Can they, as I drop the elbow on the desk, can they move above that standard? Can they be more, durable, consistent, show more leadership, and be the kind of guy that can be truly dependent on there at that position? I take that statement from Kirby Smart a little bit of a challenge to the Georgia running back room. You tell me if you agree with that. We'll make that around the doghouse. It's presented today by the Finnish Long Drink. And let me tell you, you're enjoying those final vestiges of summer out at the pool, playing some golf, going fishing, whatever else, lake. You got all kinds of fun stuff going on. Well, when you're packing that cooler for the fun you're going to have, pack it with the Finnish Long Drink, because I love and I like the video accompaniment we have here, because you see that like glistening condensation just sort of dripping down the can. I love it when you get those Finnish Long Drink cans like ultra cold. I mean, and in the summertime, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like you have the cold drink, but then you've got the ultra cold drink, the one that's like really just cold to the touch. You just love that. And when the Finnish Long Drink gets that cold in the can, you're talking about something really special, whether it's the cranberry or the original traditional flavor, or what I love now, the peach-flavored version of the Finnish Long Drink. So many of you have kind of reached out and said, hey, BA, this is a big part of my summer right now. Here in the Peach State, we love the peach-flavored version of the Finnish Long Drink. That might not be a surprise to you. We're having a great time with all of that. So if you want to find out where you can pick some up or where you can get your next batch, go to thelongdrink.com. You like mixed drinks? This is a ready-to-drink cocktail right there in the can. Not a beer. It looks like a beer because it comes in a can, but it's a ready-to-drink cocktail. So make sure you check it out online, thelongdrink.com. That's thelongdrink.com, and you can find more about that today and enjoy some. The Finnish Long Drink presenting Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, so before we're done, as I said before, Jake Fromm, really good stuff. Quarterback, Dominic Lovett, his potential emergence as a transfer wide receiver who the Dogs could have big plans for. All of that's coming up. We're going to do the tiniest little bit on the latest on the conference expansion stuff. We're going to do that here. I promise we won't do very much, like 3 minutes at the most. We'll do a couple of minutes on that here. We've got some really funny golden shoes today there as well. But for now, 3 big questions as it relates to Georgia recruiting, starting with 2 big commitment announcements on tap for this weekend. What can we expect? Let's find out with Jeff Sentell here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Audience doesn't care about this. We got some new graphics here around DawgNation. Look at that beautiful photo for Jeff Sentell inside Sanford Stadium. Got the football in his hand. Upgrading our graphics here for sure. But good to see a nice little photo there of Jeff Sentell. Fun stuff on that. And Jeff, I believe, yeah, there we go. So good to have Jeff on the program here today. And Jeff, you know the first question. You know what the conversation is going to center around. It is Saturday night. It is KJ Bolden, the five-star athlete. Credit to him for, I think, kind of making this feel like a little bit of an event. It's kind of an old-school recruiting thing here where we don't know what's going to happen. We're on guard for whatever drama might occur. Probably continues beyond just Saturday, but the next phase of this goes down Saturday night. Give me your preview for how it all plays out here.
Morning, Brandon. Everybody's doing great. You know what? Everybody's trying to make this out to be something that I don't think it is. I think it's artificial. Like if you ask anybody that really knows recruiting, to ask them, when was the last time folks were surprised? I mean, really surprised, like out of left field. And I think most people should go, the correct answer would be the Eric Gilbert recruitment. That's when his mom didn't even know at the stand. And most of the insiders were probably thinking you're hedging maybe Alabama, maybe Clemson, maybe Florida. And he surprises most of the world by choosing LSU. That was a true stunner in recruiting. And I just don't see how KJ Bolden's going to be this way. I don't. You want to say that, this is Jeff saying something really strong on a Friday, but I'll say it. I think it would be a surprise to me if KJ Bolden chose another school aside from Georgia. That's where I would kind of lean today. I know when you're a recruiting reporter and the whole world's talking about this, it's kind of part of the job to share what you're thinking. And in this day of NIL, who knows? Because lots of times these things can change. But I must have spoken to KJ Bolden maybe 20 times. I think the first time I spoke to him was in January of 2021. I'd seen some film on him from that fall, and this was at a hustling 7-on-7 practice. And at that time, there was a school that was his dream school then, and he said, and he actually came out with it and said multiple times that Florida State was his dream school. But I've known for the longest time what he's wanted to do. He said he's wanted to find a school that stresses development. He's wanted to find a school that has the freshman a chance to play early. He's always wanted to be a wide receiver. He says wide receiver is the most fun part of football to play for him, even though a lot of folks tell him that his professional future is on Sundays is as a safety. That's probably the right call right now, at least for right now. And you start thinking of all these things. I remember talking to him about how the excitement in his voice when Malachi Starks not only got on the field early at Georgia, but was making plays left and right. And you heard that narrative this week about people telling out there maybe some negative recruiting that Georgia's defense is so hard to play for. And you can point to a guy like Malachi Starks as the antithesis of that. And this is an example of a five-star heralded guy from the state of Georgia coming in and being a plug-and-play freshman All-American at Georgia. He wants development. Brandon, last night on Happy Hour with Kaylee Mansell and yourself, I was trying to, make a point. I remember him saying a long time, and sometimes the things that kids say in the baby steps or the second quarters of their recruitment are the ones that they lean on. I think Georgia was his second overall offer. I think a school like Auburn was at least maybe a year behind Georgia in terms of the offer. They've had transition. And there's even funny stuff to this recruitment, Brandon. He said one time that, I know this, man, I'm never going to go to school, and I'm going to break a Brandon rule here. I'm never going to go to a school that doesn't have a Raising Cane's there because he loves Raising Cane's. And if you sit there, you internet sleuthers over there, you go to the Raising Cane's website, and you look for one in Florida, in Tallahassee. Yeah, there's one in Tallahassee. Yes, there's one in Athens. Yes, there's one in Athens. There's not one in Auburn. So you can sit there and you can think, is that just ink blots? Is that stuff on the wall for the timeline and the history of the KJ Bolden recruitment? And you really want to think about it, it would be a surprise if he chose anything else than Georgia because, well, what's Georgia got going for it? Probably the 16 visits would be the most any invested recruit by this coaching staff has made to Georgia, especially since they've won 2 national championships or had the championship luster added to the program. the relationship with Kirby Smart. Georgia's going to get the development. Georgia's going to win. Georgia's going to get the NFL. The young man's going to Buford High School. He's accustomed to winning. I just think if you put everything in there and you crank it through the logic box in your head, you really have to think Georgia's still in a strong position right now. Hopefully, that's my ultimate stream of consciousness there, Brandon, on all things KJ Bolden.
Well, I appreciate the straightforward candor of basically, predicting Bolden to go to Georgia. I know Georgia fans like that because it's good news, but I think they also like it because it's just really straightforward. So I really appreciate that. However, I think what it also leads me to say, though, is that the idea of when was the last time there was a true surprise, I guess I would sort of squabble with that a little bit in the standpoint of in the NIL era that we do live in now, there are, I think, surprises, right? I mean, Coleman, the receiver, going to A&M the other day, that was probably an NIL-induced surprise. The defensive lineman going to South Carolina this week, that sort of felt like a little bit of an NIL-induced surprise. That I think the reason why Georgia fans are as curious about this Bolden announcement as they are is not because KJ is the make-or-break player one way or another about Georgia, what we hope is go for 4-24 by that point in time. I don't think that Bolden's the make-or-break player about that one way or another, but I do think in a lot of ways Bolden represents kind of a bellwether recruitment in two really important areas. One of those is, can Georgia get a player from Gwinnett County? Whatever the backstory is and the whatever else, this is a bellwether of, can Georgia sort of finally break through? I've kind of jokingly said that the old drought breaker Theron Sapp, for beating Tech way back in the 50s, whenever that was. This is the new version of the Georgia drought breaker, breaking kind of a drought in Gwinnett County if a guy like Bolden were to come to Georgia. So Georgia fans find this curious for that reason. And the other thing that I think the Georgia fans find curious about this, and I'm sort of speaking on behalf of a fan by saying this, is in some respects, this sort of shows you how much visits still matter. It used to be follow the visits was one of the most important, maxims in all of axioms, whatever the word is, one of the most important kind of ideas and beliefs in recruiting. If a guy visited somewhere 16 times, that really meant something. Or if a guy like KJ Bolden had a really strong relationship with the head coach, historically that's really meant something. But in the NIL era, can all that be wiped away by one team coming in 11th hour and just money whipping you because they don't have other elite recruits to go after, so therefore they're going to throw it all at you? I think that's what Georgia fans are watching for here. We are led to believe that Georgia's been in a good spot for this the entire time. Georgia versus Ohio State, or Georgia versus Florida State, or now maybe Georgia versus Auburn, if that's the case, but it's sort of always been Georgia. So does the long-standing relationship, the presence of the visits, 16 of them I believe, the presence of the strong relationship with Kirby Smart, a position that obviously he values because of his background as a player, does that stuff still matter, or can it be just completely erased by NIL at the last minute? That's why Georgia fans are so interested in this, I believe.
Well, I think it's not just the money whipping, Brandon. It's I think it's everything. Like if we're in a court of law here and we're trying to lay out the argument here and the debate here, it's not just that Georgia has NFL development. It's not just that Georgia is local. It's not just that the best relationship is Kirby Smart. It's not just that the visits are there. It's not that freshmen can play early. It's all of that. And it's like, does the money whip, is this the 80-foot Godzilla in this recruitment? You think about this, where else could you get hands-on development at this position better? And there's even talk over the last week or so that, hey, maybe KJ Bolden's going to get some receiver shine at Georgia too, should he go there. But I'm going to put that on the shelf for a second, and I want to make this point clearly. NFL development, you can look at all this, but then his head coach, Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart was an all-SEC safety at Georgia. You look at Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp was a safety at Georgia. You look at Fran Brown. He's seen as one of the most up-and-coming great recruiters in college football. There's a lot there, Brandon, and I don't know if Auburn has the equivalent there whatsoever, especially for a defensive recruit. Now, does King Cash or King Collective reign supreme here? I think that's what's fascinating, and I guess on your point, I don't think I'd use the word squabble. I would just say in terms of surprises on the Georgia sphere, the Georgia landscape, because Dylan Stewart and Cam Coleman weren't seen as guys that were on the way to Georgia or likely considered to Georgia. I think that's a factor where I see as a surprise, and you can make the argument, well, Georgia probably wasn't the team for Arik Gilbert either, but that to me is an extreme shock with a player from the state of Georgia that had been to Georgia a lot of times and just decided to say no to Georgia, and then eventually decided to say yes to Georgia. I think it's a fascinating litmus test here about, what's going to happen with NIL. Brandon, I think whether it's on air or off air, I've made my opinion kind of clear, is that if you're going to win a recruitment for KJ Bolden at the NIL table, then that's not the really way you're going to build a championship football team. With all great respect to KJ Bolden, I don't think that's the way personally. If you have NIL collective dollars, I don't think that's where you need to earmark those dollars unless you have a fountain of limitless NIL, which I feel like nobody does even at this time. But, there's a lot here about KJ Bolden. I think the one thing that everyone's not thinking about, Brandon, if it's Georgia, then I don't think it's final. I think maybe more NIL might come. I think there might be more decisions left to be made, or at least people will continue to recruit KJ Bolden. And you can best believe if it's not Georgia, then that staff in Athens is just going to say, all right, we're going to fold up our cards, fold up our tents, and we'll go after the next 5-star safety. So while August 5th feels like a finish line, especially sounds like a finish line as much as the KJ Bolden family is kind of fatigued by this overwhelming recruiting stuff, you and I both know that the early signing period is still the final line to be crossed here in this recruitment.
Last thing on this, you can make this a one-word answer because I want to talk about two other very important players here for a moment. Who is the biggest threat? Is it Auburn because of what they did last weekend? Is it Florida State because they've been more of a presence throughout the last, month or so?
I think it's Auburn. I mean, I think from what you hear, and I don't know whether it was DeMarcus Riddick and now it's KJ Bolden, but he's the number one guy on the Auburn board or the Auburn to-do list. And I think the resources behind it, Brandon and I lived in Alabama for like 8 years, and I know every day is a competition between Auburn and Alabama, and I know what a momentum win this would be for Auburn, not just beat Alabama for a player it wanted, but to beat Georgia in Georgia's backyard that Kirby Smart was so invested in. I think that's something that the War Eagle and the Tigers could rally around as they kind of try to play catch-up here, where they're at least 2 or 3 years behind both Georgia and Alabama.
Let's move on to another commitment announcement taking place on Sunday, that for 4-star running back Nate Frazier. And on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger this past Wednesday, you reminded us of something really important about Frazier, which I think has to be a part of this discussion, which is that right now Frazier has an official visit scheduled to Georgia the week of the South Carolina game, but he's making his commitment announcement on Sunday. Now, listen, I'm not that smart, but that feels like that could potentially be a little bit of a foreshadowing of the announcement. I certainly don't take that as bad news if you're Georgia there. So does that tell you everything you need to know about how Frazier may go on Sunday?
I think everything you need to know, to nutshell it, you've got that curious future data point there. You've also got a tremendous amount of goodwill from Dwight Phillips and Chauncey Bowens socially and on social media when they discuss when the subject of Georgia adding a third running back comes up. I think there's the NFL development. I don't think you see balancing or equitable love from Alabama commitments regarding Nate Frazier or Oregon or Texas A&M. I think those are a lot of points. And then it's the fact that, Brandon, depth chart watching is pretty important here. And you see Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards, and, that's at least 2 backs Georgia might lose to the NFL or might bid fondly off to the NFL. And I think a lot of those things, especially when you got Dwight Phillips, who could be a lot of places on the Georgia chessboard for a whiz offensive coordinator like Mike Bobo. And then you've got Chauncey Bowens, who just recently bench pressed 360 pounds. So that's a lot of strength there to go with like 10.8 speed and 220 pounds. And you've got the mercurial Dwight Phillips that I just mentioned. And then you can add a guy like Nate Frazier, who somehow have as the number 1 running back in the country. Brandon, we got to do our due diligence here. One thing that I forgot to mention in all this KJ Bolden, Nate Frazier talk, Williams Winery, maybe that's your next question on your doodle sheet to get to me here. But if you want to talk top targets and you want to talk where you spend NIL, I think the trenches is where you need to go. And I think, I still have it on Hedges for a reason. Like I said, with great respect for KJ Bolden, I think football games continually have to be one up front. The more big people that can dominate you have, that's who you go get. And I think Williams Nwaneri is that type of guy. And he's, everybody wants to say, what's Jeff going to say about Georgia will still go on, or what's the narrative here about if Georgia doesn't get KJ Bolden? Well, if Georgia doesn't get KJ Bolden, the Williams Nwaneri recruitment becomes a lot more important, because a lot of folks can argue that the more important chess piece for Georgia's future, for go for 4 and 24 or go for 5 and 25 or whatever, is a player, a dominating defensive lineman type like Williams Nwaneri. So I think as much as people want to focus on this as whether Auburn's going to have its chest out and be strutting like Ric Flair on Saturday night, or whether, kind of the universe makes sense and he kind of chooses Georgia for a lot of the reasons we've documented, I think no matter what happens on Saturday night, the focus will then shift to Williams Nwaneri, and that's a very important piece of Georgia's championship hopes.
All right, let me finish on Frazier before we get to Nwaneri, because I do want to talk to you about that to close out our conversation. I mean, to me, if Georgia's running back trio for this class is a Dwight Phillips and a Chauncey Bowens, you add Frazier to that, Jeff, I just feel like that is a very successful pull for Georgia. I think that Frazier looks like a really good player. And to see Georgia with this level of running back recruiting, I think could be really exciting, because I think you're talking about a variety of players. I mean, Phillips is one of the most athletic backs I've seen Georgia recruit, I think, quite some time. Frazier's kind of the combination, I think, of, kind of everything there. And to me, this trio, if you can kind of close it off with Frazier on Sunday night, you have really, I believe, breathed a lot of new life into the Georgia running back situation, I think.
I think it changes it, Brandon. I'm going to say this, and, Del McGee is an ace recruiter and always will be, but it gives Georgia more gassers, more home run hitters, more, I like to say this a lot, more explosive sticks of dynamite. And that room hasn't really quite had that. I think it would be a perfect synergy, if you will, of guys that can get the team up 21 points with all the speed Georgia has at receiver and their tight ends. What you going to do with a 10-2-4 or a 10-1-5 and Dwight Phillips coming out of the backfield, running a lot of those Kenny McIntosh and James Cook plays. And once the team's up 28-0 or 28-7, then you've got these bangers, these mashers like Bowens and Andrew Paul and Branson Robinson and Roderick Robinson, where a lot of defensive coordinators will cry uncle. They're going to cry uncle for the fact that, okay, I have an NLI player that I can deal with Georgia's best receiver. I have another 5-star safety that I can deal with Georgia's tight end problem. And then you're like, I'm out of options. I don't have another athlete like that to cover this back out of the backfield. When I have to kind of worry about Georgia's speed in the slot now as well, with guys like Anthony Evans and, Nitro Showtime Tuggle outside. And you've got speed demons galore with like Zeke Haynes all over the field. They don't have enough counters to what Georgia's going to have. And that's, in a lot of respects, Brandon, if we went back to and we said, Brandon, what do you want Georgia's backfield to look like? You would want more of those old school Warwick Dunn, those new school James Cook types, where Georgia can win in the passing game. They can win on third down by checking it down to the back and him making a couple of guys miss because there's nothing but green grass left there. I really think, and I'm very careful because I know the fan base wants me to speak, wants a guy like myself to speak in player parallels, but Frazier has a lot of moxie to his game. He has a lot of good stuff to his game, enough where I feel comfortable saying you're going to see some DeAndre Swift type flashes there and what he can bring to the table. And also he's been schooled at one of the preeminent top 10 programs in the country and the nation in modern day out of Santa Ana. So he's used to big boy football, and there's going to be a tremendous opportunity there should Georgia land Nate Frazier.
All right, you mentioned Williams Nwaneri a moment ago. I want to finish with discussing that here right now. As someone who tries to follow this stuff closely, the best I can tell is Nwaneri has now postponed his commitment announcement for the second time here. As a Georgia fan, I take that as, I guess, as good a news as you can get, because if he were to commit today, I'm led to believe it would not be to Georgia. It would probably be, I guess, Missouri, who seems like, they're kind of, throwing all their eggs in the Nwaneri basket here potentially. So tell me more about this. How much does a delayed announcement for Nwaneri keep Georgia in this and give the Dogs a chance to kind of wrestle themselves out in front of what is Missouri and I guess possibly Oklahoma too, although I have a hard time figuring out how Oklahoma factors into this right now themselves. So just tell me anything you want to about what the delay here for Nwaneri maybe does for Georgia.
Now, hold on, Brandon. You might have been enjoying the Marlowe's happy hour a little bit too much last night with Kaylee Mansell. Did you get the update last night that Winery has now set a decision for the 14th of August?
That's right,
Did you have that information yet?
That's right. That's what I'm leading into. The fact that it was supposed to be the 1st, then it was the 7th, I think, and now it's the 14th. Seems like that's been postponed, a couple of times here. So does that help Georgia?
I mean, you just got to look at the ink blots. You got to look at the traffic here, Brandon. I mean, to me, a significant part was that last visit that Winery took to Athens when he could sneak in before the dead period came down. I think that was important. I think his visits so far have been important. I've heard for a while that you've got spheres of influence. Let me say that very, very casually, that spheres of influence have maybe going in 3 different directions for Williams Winery. There's coaches, there's players, there's parents, there's mom, there's thoughts for Oklahoma, there's thoughts for Missouri, and then there's thoughts for Georgia as well. And again, this is one of those things where Georgia is going to come into this final exam here for Williams Winery as prepared as they can possibly be. They tell him he's one of them. There's a guy like Jaden Riddell in Missouri that's recruiting heavily for the Dogs as well here. And if it's a Missouri, if it's an Oklahoma, there's really one of those things where you go into the exam thinking, what else can Georgia do? Georgia has put together pretty much an airtight resume to win this recruitment. And it's one of those things, if you want to say money whipped again, like maybe we need to have a money whipped column sometimes for when we look back on the anatomy of Georgia's recruiting classes and who went where and who didn't go to Georgia. Well, sometimes that might be a new NIL factor where money whipped happens. And Brendan, I'll kind of share this. When I speak candidly to recruits, a lot of them feel, especially at the highest level, that they're so talented that they can get to the NFL dream wherever they want to go. So it's not so much that it's an extreme confidence in their skills, and for a lot of cases, players like Williams Winery, it might be right. I think he could probably go to a Division II school or an Ivy League school and find his way to the NFL. He's so talented. It's just the preparation and being ready for the NFL that the University of Georgia, I feel, and the SEC kind of sets itself apart. Great player, Brennan. I know lots of times people expect a guy in my position to hype up the latest and the greatest is indeed that, without thinking about with the background and the perspective. Is this guy better than this guy, better than this guy? I think Williams Winery is truly a unique prospect, even with this sphere of guys that Georgia recruits every year.
We'll have certainly plenty of time to talk about that over the course of the next couple of weeks. No doubt we will do that. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger today. We'll read a bunch from you next couple of days here at DawgNation.com. We'll talk to you on video tomorrow night one way or another as Bolden gets ready to make his choice and hopefully celebrating good news, if you're a Georgia fan anyway, Sunday as it relates to Nate Frazier. Thanks for your time, and Jeff, it's a fun time of year as all these pieces start falling into place.
Yeah, we might be done, Brandon, by September 1st. Let me tell you that. So we're going to have to crank up a lot of 2025 talk. One shameless plug, shameful plug, whatever to say. I know I always try to tease and to plug what's coming down for DawgNation today. I know it's a Friday. I know people say, people are at the beach or they're at the golf course and they don't read things on Friday. I'm going to put 2 very important reads on the KJ story on DawgNation.com today. One of them is a story that I bet you haven't read anywhere yet, and it kind of shows you guys how I see the KJ Bolden story in its perspective, in its totality.
Nice.
And then you'll have a lot of comments on Georgia and Georgia's chances in another story. I think if you put both of those 2 together, it gives everybody a better ground level view of what to expect and maybe a lot of great, important background material for the decision to be made on Saturday. So watch DawgNation.com. You'll see a couple of Sentell bylines on there, and the subject will be KJ Bolden, of course. So look out for it. Watch it on social media because those will be coming soon today.
Done and done, Jeff. Good stuff. Thanks so much. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Appreciate you, man. See you tomorrow.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, really good, fun time. And as I said before, one way or another, I think the Bolden's done a good job of making his announcement sort of feel like an event, and I'm kind of excited for it. So we'll see how it plays out. And nice to hear Jeff Sentell, if you're a Georgia fan, Jeff kind of laying it out in really as clear terms as possible that Jeff believes Bolden is Georgia, the Auburn, the Florida State, all of that has just been a smokescreen and a distraction from what apparently Jeff thinks was the destination the entire time. So you can't beat that in terms of kind of clear analysis ahead of the decision, and we'll tune in tomorrow night to find out if that is indeed true. And we'll also be tuning in 2024 to some big things on the tap and the horizon for our friends at Royal Caribbean. Boy, what an exciting time. Debut of Icon of the Seas, January of 2024. You've heard me say that. Largest cruise ship at sea, redefining the cruise vacation experience. Jessica Slater can tell you all about it. Great travel agent, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. Or email. We're giving the email out now, which I'm excited about. jslater@dreamvacations.com. jslater@dreamvacations.com. Now, to be honest with you, in addition to being excited about Icon of the Seas and kind of a lot of the new concepts it's introducing, I'm also excited about the next brand new Oasis class ship, which also debuts in July of 2024. That's Utopia of the Seas. And that's going to be sailing out of Port Canaveral. I sort of think of Port Canaveral as kind of my home port. That's where I do my cruising, typically speaking. And I love the idea that Royal Caribbean's really kind of setting a standard right now. They're going to dominate the short cruises, those 3 and the 4-night cruises, with the biggest and best ships they have on offer, including our own DawgNation cruise coming up in April on the Allure of the Seas. That's an Oasis-class ship. But then the brand new Oasis-class ship, Utopia of the Seas, in July of 2024. So this is an exciting time to be looking at those shorter cruises. If you're a first-time cruiser, oftentimes it's the shorter cruises that end up being popular for the first-timers. Or if you're like me, you got kids and my daughter's gymnastics, my son's baseball, my wife's got 1,000 things going on. Sometimes the shorter cruises just sort of fits our schedule a little bit better. So Royal Caribbean says when you want to take the shorter 3 or 4 night cruise, take the very best cruise you can have on a brand new Oasis class ship starting in July of 2024, or Allure of the Seas like our DawgNation cruise is going to be. And of course, go to royaldogs.com for more information on that. I'm going to be brief because Jake Fromm is coming up in a moment, and that is always a great conversation. Let me, though, give you the latest on the conference realignment stuff, and I won't do a ton on this necessarily, but the Arizona Board of Regents did meet yesterday. I guess there's no immediate resolution to this, but the conventional wisdom that I shared yesterday seems more true now than ever, which is Arizona is likely on its way out of the Pac-12. That was always the next school likely to follow Colorado because they were the next rung up the ladder at the bottom of the pecking order in the Pac-12. If Colorado, the absolute bottom, leaves, then Arizona becomes the next bottom, and they're likely to leave too. But it seems like, as I also mentioned to you yesterday, maybe reluctantly, maybe kind of unwillingly, Arizona State's going to be dragged out of this there as well. Their university president's kind of in love with the Pac-12. He kind of likes rubbing elbows with all the, the sort of snobby Stanford, Cal, academic, high-minded folks. He kind of likes the idea of being in the same room there, even though at one point in time the Simpsons joked about Arizona State. But nonetheless, Arizona State sort of likes the idea of all of that, but they may end up getting dragged to the Big 12 because the Pac-12 is about not to exist. Of course, the overtures from the Big 10 towards Oregon, towards Washington. It seems like some of that's getting more serious. Let me give you one final thought on all this for now, and we'll just sort of see where it goes after this. A lot of people are going to tell you that all of this, first of all, it does not look great for college sports. I kind of agree with that. But they're going to tell you it's really greed that's driving this, that college football is being ruined by greed. And at first blush and at first glance, I totally understand why people would feel that way. This seems like a mad dash to grab some cash, right? It looks like greed is driving all of this. But I think the real truth is that the thing that's pushing the consolidation of college football into a couple of major conferences is really two things that have nothing to do with greed. It's arrogance and it's apathy. Arrogance on the part of the Pac-12 because they did have the Stanfords and the Cals, and because they were, and really even like UCLA, USC, those are respected academic institutions there too. And somehow this academic prestige they had mattered even when they weren't winning games in the football field. And to a certain extent, a lot of these sort of fancier academic type schools, these sort of pretentious, blowhard kind of academic types, they have thought that gave them a free pass in college athletics forever, and they don't have to try as hard as their other brethren who are out there trying to compete in athletics, because athletics is sort of a separate thing from academics. There's academic excellence, there's nothing wrong with that, but athletic excellence is its own thing separate from that, and it's a different kind of pursuit to go out and pursue that. But a lot of schools in the football field, especially because that's what we're really talking about, have sort of thought, well, that doesn't matter because we're Vanderbilt, or we're Northwestern, or in the case of the Pac-12, we're Stanford, we're Cal, or we're one of these schools that feels like we can rub elbows with Stanford and Cal. So they became apathetic in athletics. They weren't competing at the highest level. And in fact, apathetic may be the wrong word. How about an easier word to understand? They're just lazy. A lot of these academic, high-minded ivory tower places are just lazy when it comes to sports. They're happy to collect the checks, but they don't do anything to earn the money. So if you're a program that does have some athletic value, of course you would distance yourself from these leeches. Of course you would. These parasites. Of course you would distance yourself from these schools who are more than happy to take your money that you earn via the respect you bring to the conference that you're in, and then as they're cashing the check for the money that you earn, say, hey, aren't you glad you get to hang around with us because we're so smart? We're research. We're good at books. Of course, if you're a program that has some athletic value, eventually you'll just get tired of that. And if you could distance yourself from that, in the case of the Pac-12, of course you would. Or some of these ACC schools that may eventually distance themselves from some others if they have the contractual ability to do that. Of course you would. It's not greed that's driving this. It's arrogance for a lot of programs who convinced themselves it was okay to be lazy because the football factories would earn all the money. Well, eventually, of course, you get tired of that. And nobody tells you that because arrogant people very rarely know they're arrogant, and lazy people very rarely realize they're lazy. But in this particular case, that's what's driving all of this. It gets blamed on greed, but it's the apathy and the arrogance of a lot of schools who've cashed checks in conferences for money they didn't earn that I think has created the frustration that's led to the consolidation we may see happening right now. And we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean, and we'll shift our gears back towards Georgia football right now with some really strong stuff from Jake Fromm as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, time for our Kroger Fresh Take as we bring in the former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, who's kind enough to spend some time with us in the midst of a busy time for him going through training camp there with the Washington Commanders. Jake, how is all of that going, I guess, first and foremost, as you guys get ready for the upcoming season and you make a case for yourself there? Hopefully all of that's working out pretty well here right now.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, what's going on? Thanks for having me. Man, just grinding through it right in the middle of camp. We have a long way to go, but excited to play in a few preseason games coming up, and just trying to enjoy every little bit of it.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too. Can't wait to see all of that. And frankly, it's just kind of nice to have football back of any form or fashion, right? So, the first football we get is that NFL preseason. We get high school coming up in a couple of weeks here, which is obviously really good. And then the college football is really kind of the last thing to start because we don't get that until the regular season games begin at the end of August and the beginning of September. So anything that sort of looks like 11 on 11 where guys are getting tackled to the ground, at this point in time, we're all so hungry for all this. We'll just sort of take anything we can get at this point.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. Anytime you can turn the TV on, and flip and find a channel and there's football on, it's a good time of the year.
So I want to talk to you about this because this is something I bring up on the show from time to time, and I think there's a chance we may have mentioned this with each other at one point in time before. But if you go back to 2017 when you were kind of first coming into Georgia as a freshman, Kirby kind of talked about you, a good bit as you were kind of going through, I guess, your first spring practice and during that summer there as well, kind of always mentioning your name as a part of a quarterback competition. Not to disrespect Jacob Eason or anything, but just kind of mentioning you as a guy who was making that a real competition and kind of, making that a real push, to have a chance to play. And obviously that ended up working out very well for you in your true freshman season. Did you have a sense kind of early on that, you did have a real chance? I mean, obviously you're an athlete, so you believe in yourself, but, sometimes the door is more open maybe than others. Like, I guess, how real did you perceive that to be before you came to Georgia, or as you were maybe first getting to Georgia, that, stepping out of high school here, I actually do have a chance to insert myself into this competition?
Yeah, it's kind of really tough. I mean, during the recruiting process, you really let on believe that you're really going to have a shot. Thankfully I came in and enrolled early, which really gave me more of an opportunity and a better understanding of the offense and the way Coach Smart does things with his program. But during the spring, I mean, mostly I was running with the twos. Every now and then he would throw me a bone and let me run with the ones every now and then. But for the most part, Jacob ran with the ones and I ran with the twos. And I mean, we would just try to compete, throughout every period and do better. But just always knew to stay ready and never knew when my opportunity was going to get called.
I think the reason why I bring that up is because what I've sort of said as Georgia kind of goes through this with Carson Beck and Brock Vanderiff and Gunnar Stockton, that while we sort of think of Kirby as the kind of coach who wants to play the cards close to the vest and not reveal more than he has to, the truth is, your career being an example of this, that if somebody's doing well, whether it be a guy like Brock who's making this real competition or someone like Carson who's earning the respect of his teammates, it sort of seems like Kirby probably doesn't always keep that kind of stuff a secret as much as some people think that he would, because obviously there's something to be benefited from just sort of saying out loud what he's seeing there with his own eyes. And so I sort of think about that as we'll see this play out over the course of the next month, that if Carson's taking the reins, Kirby will probably admit that during some of these press conferences that he does. Or if Brock is really making his push, then it seems like Kirby Smart might go out there and say that as well. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good take on your part. I mean, for the most part, I mean, in my opinion, I think Kirby, for a lot of things, is an open book. Will call things as he sees it, even to the media space as well. And then also, too, sometimes he will throw things out there in the media to see how his players react to hearing what he said, if that makes sense. Like, hey, if someone, is getting praised, hey, how is he going to handle that? Because, that would be an indicator of how he would handle it throughout the season after a good game or something. How is he going to handle it and go and respond the next week and play and prepare for the next week's game? So, I mean, there's a lot of things that Coach thinks about and does and says for particular reasons, and sometimes we figure things out, and sometimes we'll never know.
The other thing that Kirby talked about on Wednesday this week when he was kind of giving his kickoff press conference was wanting to see that quarterback have the command of the offense. We certainly understand that. Jake, I think most of us sort of have an appreciation for how difficult it is to go out there and make throws and stand there knowing you're about to get, drilled by some outside linebacker or something like that. Obviously, we know how tough that part of it is. But when it comes to understanding everything that needs to be known, maybe we don't fully appreciate that from time to time. I mean, you were playing at Georgia as a true freshman. Did you feel like you knew the offense? Did you feel like you had full command of all of that? And I guess, how difficult is the cognitive part of what we're going to ask a starting quarterback to do at this level?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I can go down the list. There's so many things that I believe gets taken for granted from the quarterback position, just what they have to kind of deal and put up with, what they have to know, how they have to prepare. I mean, the weight of a program, the weight of a franchise is on their shoulders. And not only do they have to be, have to have the physical traits to go out and perform and make plays at a high level, but they also have to be cerebral as well. And they have to be emotionally in check as well to be able to handle the roller coaster of the highs and the lows throughout the whole season. So there's a lot of things that go on, man, and you want to, especially during camp, battle with a quarterback and make them tough because the season's only going to be tougher.
No doubt about that. I want to ask you about a Georgia player in particular that seems like he's gotten a little bit of buzz here to begin the camp. Prior to that, let me remind folks, this is our Kroger Fresh Take with the former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm here on DawgNation Daily today. And don't forget, this month, Kroger's got a lot of fun stuff coming up with Kroger Chef Jr. And during the month of August, Kroger teaming up with the Atlanta Braves here for a special theme around Kroger Chef Jr. Making those chili slaw dogs here right now. A couple of different times for you to take advantage of that here this month. So go to the website, Kroger Chef Jr. That's the word junior spelled out, Junior, KrogerChefJr.com. Find out when and where the event's going to take place this month, where you can be a part of making those chili slaw dogs with your child there. And don't forget, this month you get the special Braves-themed apron to go along with the other great gifts that Kroger gives you as a part of the Kroger Chef Jr. experience. It's just $7 per child. So find out more online. Once again, KrogerChefJr.com. That's Junior, KrogerChefJr.com for more on that. So, Jake, we don't get to see very much of practice. There are portions of time when the media will, a little bit of, eyes on everything you can get when you're out there like that. And one of the things we've read at DawgNation.com last couple of days is it sounds like there's some interesting things happening around Dominic Lovett, the slot receiver who transferred in from Missouri. And, to me, he's a super fascinating player because this guy had nearly 900 yards receiving for Missouri a year ago. We didn't see a ton of him on G-Day. Part of me kind of wonders if they sort of intentionally kind of, kept him under wraps, not to kind of show off what kind of weapon he might truly be. I know you've had some time to spend some time around the Georgia program. You've obviously been pretty busy with your own football career there as well. But how much of Lovett have you observed? Did you see him play, I guess, last year for Missouri? Have you seen him much around Athens? And just how valuable can a slot receiver like this be going on with all the other offensive weapons Georgia sort of has in place?
Yeah, I've heard the buzz around him as well throughout the spring and throughout the summer. I think their receiving core as a group, just keeps getting better and better and better. And they're getting some really good recruits to come in that room to compete, and then also too in the transfer portal. So, whoever is out there slinging the rock for him, I think he's going to have all the weapons in the world. And then also with Brock Bowers too at playing tight end. So, what they got going on right now is really special. Let's just kind of see how it goes, and hopefully they start clicking fast and early throughout camp here.
Jake, I love the conversation. Appreciate you making time for us on it because I know how busy you are right now. We keep rooting for you hard up there in D.C. Hope it all continues to go well, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Awesome, Brandon. Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Hey, really good stuff from Jake Fromm there, as always. And speaking of good stuff, don't forget, we're only a few days away from one of the most fun events that takes place in Atlanta each and every year. I'm talking about the Tour Championship at East Lake Golf Club, kind of the culmination of the PGA Tour playoffs that are kind of ongoing here during this late summer time of year. It's August 23rd through the 27th. You got a chance to be a part of this if you go to tourchampionship.com for more on that. That's tourchampionship.com. You can find out about how you can be a part of, whether it be regular grounds passes or some hospitality type stuff, and really take advantage of all the fun stuff that takes place, not just watching the great golf event as some of the top guys in the world, the Scotty Schefflers and the John Rahms and the Rory McIlroys or Ricky Fowlers, folks like that kind of go out there and try to really win what has really turned out to be one of the great culminations of the golf season there with the Tour Championship, but also take advantage of some of the local eats like Henri's Bakery on hand, Farm Burger, and, of course, some great cocktails as well, including the signature cocktail for the Tour Championship event, the Calamity Jane, which, by the way, if you go to the East Lake clubhouse, they have sort of an original version of kind of the Calamity Jane putter, which is kind of a cool thing to see. But nonetheless, it's the culmination of the FedEx Cup with the Tour Championship right there at East Lake Golf Club. Go to tourchampionship.com for a lot more on that. Right before the start of the college football season, we got the culmination of the PGA Tour playoffs, the Tour Championship right there at East Lake. So check them out online, tourchampionship.com for a lot more on that. As we close out, one this kind of turned out to be a little bit of a marathon show. Let me give you a handful of golden shoes here. A lot of fun to say goodbye to you on a Friday. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We had the great sort of an old school throwback to a great boxing nights last Saturday night on Showtime as Frazier knocked out Spence, and our buddy Ryan Walker, who's a great sports fan, says come October, Florida's going to get the same treatment that Spence did. Bama's going to there as well, and you see the Florida Gator, lousy stinking Gator, if you will, down for the count after that. I said Frazier. I meant to say Crawford. Terrence Crawford, the big knockout blow there on Showtime this past Saturday. So that was a lot of fun, and good job by Ryan Walker there on that. Bass and Dog shared this with us on earlier this week in celebration of our 2000th show, a throwback to Jeff and me at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And one of the things I can't help but notice from Bass and Dog's picture is just how little gray hair I had back then. That's obviously a good number of years ago. Let me show you this next one here. That's the same picture that Bass and Dog sent with the picture of me from last Saturday. Now, I have been told that my hair is not actually as gray as it looks on the right side there, that the lighting was not doing me any particular favors in that picture. But you want to talk about, they always talk about how presidents age and things like that. Look at what 2000 shows have done to me. From a picture there in 2017, which would have been year 2, moving into year 3 of our show, to the picture there after 8 years of putting up with all y'all. A lot more Whether the lighting has kind of fouled me up or not, a lot more gray hair than they used to be. So we appreciate Bass and Dog there on that. How about our next golden shoe to give out here? Bill Sanders, one of the first to use the hashtag #Go4 3 in 23. He says that he can smell football season. You better believe it's all on the way, and Go4 3 in 23 in full effect very soon. Bill, we're really excited about all of that. How about our next golden shoe here for today? Georgia on Tap shared this with me the other day. An important reminder to give all of you. Today, I am told, is exactly 1,000 days since the last time that Florida beat Georgia. In a pandemic year of 2020, we don't even believe that counts, but nonetheless, that was the last Florida win over Georgia, and it was exactly 1,000 days ago today. So congratulations and best wishes to all who celebrate there on that. Frankie Fibonacci shared. We talked, I guess, this week about the nice high and tight fade, almost a Stequavius style fade haircut there for Carson Beck, and Frankie Fibonacci was joking about that there as well, calling it Beckwavius in honor of the Stetson Bennett haircut from last year. And I got to tell you, he looks pretty good. That is businesslike and ready to roll for Carson Beck. We appreciate Frankie Fibonacci sharing us that photo. We'll give him a golden shoe there as well. And our next golden shoe goes to Army Dog Charlie, who we had some fun with Javon Bullard off the top. And Army Dog shared this from Lance, who says he wants to make this into a meme. Javon Bullard celebrating with Kirby Smart, the Bullard quote, "The fact that you're still talking about that play, that's on you." Well said by Javon Bullard. Nicely shared by Lance and Army Dog Charlie, who shared it with me. And then finally, to our good friend Kaylee Mansell, who I actually just exchanged a little bit of a message with, who said to say hello to everybody on DawgNation Daily. She celebrated last night her debut as the DawgNation host for our DawgNation Happy Hour presented by Marlowe's Tavern, and she did a great job. And we want to give a shout-out to her and a golden shoe coming her way there as well. So fun way to close out our week. Lots of golden shoes. And with that, we'll get ready to say goodbye to you here on a Friday. So, as Jeff Sentell said, DawgNation.com and the DawgNation video channel is going to be busy the next couple of days here. KJ Bolden tomorrow night. We're watching it closely. We'll have live coverage of all of that. And then, of course, on Sunday, for Nate Frazier there, too, the 4-star running back. Jeff's got a bunch of great stories coming there at DawgNation.com. And who knows, if this show is just a little bit longer, we could take it all the way to Saturday night because it feels like it's been a little bit of a marathon. We're going to try to tighten that up just a little bit. But, we had a lot of good topics. Jake Fromm, Jeff Sentell. I feel like we did right by you, even if we were a little on the longer side today. But nonetheless, hope you're getting ready for a great weekend. And let me tell you who's not getting ready for a great weekend. That is those lousy stinking Gators. Who knows? Grammar's not my strong suit. Lousy stinking Gators, because it's been 1,000 days, as what was said before, since they beat Georgia. And in 85 days, they lose again. You love to think about that. And we'll see you back here Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We will talk to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. As I'm talking to you, some of this realignment stuff is kind of playing out. I can't quite tell what's news and what's just people wanting to tweet. I can't quite tell. So y'all tell me if something actually is coming out of all of this. And we'll kind of dive in here and get your comments here and see what's on your mind.
Hey, Brandon.
Yes, sir.
One quick comment. One of our former bosses used to say a show is only too long when it's boring. I mean, this show is action-packed from start to finish.
Thank you. I appreciate that. See, it's very important for me, whether it be Michael Carvel or Kaylee Mansell. I need people like, like when the boxer goes to the corner and they're like, you got him, champ. You got him, champ. Hey, he's about to give up. He's about to quit. Like, I have to have people in my corner, like, constantly affirming me. My poor wife, she understands that. You got to constantly be sort of feeding my ego. Otherwise, I may just kind of fall apart. Scott Harris says that my gray hair may have more to do with my kids than the number of shows. I think that's actually true, because my daughter will be, sometimes she'll be like running her fingers through my hair and she'll be like, Daddy, how come you got so much gray hair? And I always tell her, well, I didn't used to have this gray hair before you were born, which is both true and also, a little bit of a zinger in her direction, which she always laughs at. Scott Harris says, is Kaylee Mansell Rusty's daughter? It is. It is indeed. By the way, I just saw a picture of Rusty online. He had some nice little photos done here, little glamour shot style photo work done here. Pretty impressive stuff. 478 says, I got a tailgate spot for the last cocktail party. Here's the thing, though, 478. I don't think this is the last cocktail party anymore. Going back to the summer, I'm talking about early spring, summer type thing, early warm weather season. We were sort of talking about, hey, get ready. You may get ready to enjoy this cocktail party for the last time. I think of all the things in college sports that are changing, the one thing that seems to kind of show some staying power is I think the cocktail party is going to hang around for a little while, which I'm a little bit surprised about. I thought it was going another direction, but I think it's actually going to stay here for a while. Jonathan Aaron says he blames G. Grace or Jay Shipes for making my hair go gray. Could be the case. Let's see what else. John McAleer says that Marvin Harrison, this is funny, John. He says Marvin Harrison Jr. got hit so hard by Javon Bullard it made the Ohio State defense stop playing. That's really funny. Let's see what else. Paul Moon says thoughts on the timing of KJ Bolden and Nate Frazier back to back. He says conspiracy theory, Kirby Smart maybe trying to put some good news after what might be bad news. Yeah, I think we've said that before about Kirby Smart, and sometimes maybe it is true. In this particular case, I don't know that's necessarily it. I don't think. So I guess on the one hand, it could be true. As I said before, we've seen something like that kind of happen before. But on the other hand, I think you see a situation where I think recruits kind of program this a little bit now, and they kind of want that moment to themselves. And so I'm not saying that Frazier and Bolden coordinated this together with each other, but I do know that you go back a few days ago, you had a lot of recruits kind of popping near the same time. And if you want to kind of create some space for yourself, then you kind of put it at a certain time so you've got that. So I get the idea of Georgia fans being on guard that the Frazier punctuation mark kind of comes as a, kind of a mood changer after what Bolden might do. I get that. I guess I sort of think this is more along the lines of just sort of programming your announcement for maximum attention. If I had to guess, that's probably a little bit more of what I think this might be. And to that point there as well, I mean, Jeff Sentell was as clear as he's ever been in terms of the fact that he still thinks that Bolden's coming to Georgia, despite the fact that not everybody necessarily does right now. Kenneth Holt says I might say that I didn't have all these gray hairs until I started listening to these Bama and Ohio State fans whine all the time. Yeah, that may be the case. Maybe that's the case. But I have been told reliably that my hair is not as gray as it looks in that picture. Because when I first saw that picture, and I think that picture came from our good friend Jennifer Sperlin, who's one of our great Facebook commenters. And listen, I love Jennifer. This is not in any way directed towards her, but when I saw her picture of me, I was like, oh my gosh, am my hair that gray? It's kind of like the same thing a couple of years ago where I was interviewing Matt Luke when Luke was still the Georgia offensive line coach. This is right after he got hired, on the field at the Sugar Bowl at the conclusion of the game. And I thought my hair looked crazy gray back then, and I blamed it on the lighting inside the dome. Well, come to find out, I probably was getting a little more gray than I probably realized. But when I saw the picture the other day, I was like, my hair's not that gray. It is getting grayer, no doubt about that. I don't think it's that gray. I blame Jennifer Sperlin's camera for that. I'm kidding, Jennifer, you're watching. Jay Shipe says, when it comes to my gray hair, I'm in denial, like Bama fans thinking Saban's still a great coach. There you go. Honestly, that's it. So to me, this is bad lighting because this is from 2019. That's bad lighting because my hair looks super gray right there, but so does Matt Luke's, and I think we're both kind of messed up by the bad lighting right there. My hair is also just kind of a rough spot anyway right there. But I think I was undone by some bad lighting on that. So if the hair looks too gray, it's the lighting's fault. That's what we're going to do. Jonathan Aaron says I should pull a Ryan Day and just color it. I mean, Nick Saban he's just spray painting that stuff left and right. You can always tell when Nick Saban's kind of a day or two behind on getting it sprayed down again because you start to see a little bit of that. You start to see that gray kind of creeping back in like cracks in the foundation of the Alabama program. But honestly, I mean, there's a part of me that's just sort of jealous of Ryan Day. Like, I should have just owned that from the beginning because I've always been a kind of guy. Like, I'm just sort of a natural guy, right? I mean, for better or for worse, I'm just sort of who I am, right? Believe it or not, I'm actually fairly low maintenance. But But part of me is like, honestly, maybe I should have just colored my hair. Maybe I should have done that. Foster Moss says we need the bearded BA back. Well, listen, if I grow my beard back, it ain't going to look like Ryan Day's. Let's see what else. Very funny stuff. All right, let me pop over to Facebook, see what they're talking about today. Let's see what's going on over there. On Facebook. Eventually, we'll get there. One of these days. Now we're here. On Facebook. Jacob O'Neill says, what year did we first start this show? So we had our first show on August the 31st, 2015. It was the week leading into the start of the season. Georgia was playing, a rando team in 2015. We did our first video show, which was Facebook only at the time, in February of 2017. And then we added YouTube somewhere around. It's funny, like YouTube was not nearly as big a deal for streaming back then as it obviously is now. A good percentage of the content on YouTube now is some sort of stream. That's not the way it was back then. So we started streaming on Facebook because back then that's where you streamed. And then, YouTube became a little bit of a thing. So we started doing that. So by 2017, we were pretty readily available video on both Facebook and YouTube. YouTube was kind of a smaller streaming platform at that time. A very big video platform, but a smaller streaming platform. So we started first show in 2015, video on 2017, and been kind of rolling on ever since then. And if you want to go back and look at all this, we said this the other day, we've had 6 different studios, right? So the very first studio was a little bit of a radio studio over at WS. See, like the legend is that the show started in a closet in my house. That's probably a better story, but the actual truth is the closet in my house was the second studio we had. The first studio we had was over at WSB. They were kind enough to let us use a radio, kind of a production studio to do the show from. We did it there for a while. Eventually, they got tired of me being there all the time, which they had every right to be. And so at that point, now we got to go do the show from my home. And that's when, kind of like my wife's closet, we moved her clothes into my closet. We sort of shared those together and took all the shelves down and kind of put, some stuff in there. And we did podcast only from my closet in my house there for a little while. And then eventually we kind of moved the studio space to, where our, DawgNation World Headquarters offices were. And then we kind of built like what I think of as sort of real studios. We had 2 of those at the old building, and then we moved here. Even that's been a couple of years ago now, I guess. It's just amazing how much time flies. Randy Hall wondering about the hair products and the DawgNation cruise. Let me tell you something. There are some people who've got some wild pictures of my hair going back to the cruise because it's so windy on that last night. So it's funny that you bring that up because there was some of that. Let's see what else. Charlotte Gravett says something very important. She says, it's all just part of living. Just praise God for giving you a life long enough to be able to age and turn gray. You're absolutely right about that, Charlotte. You could not be more correct on that. Absolutely. Very well said indeed. Let's see what else. Because I've said before, it's like, when it comes to like my face and stuff like that, I'm going to have more wrinkles than the average person. I just know I'm going to because I like to be outside, right? Listen, skincare is important. I'm not saying that it's not, but I like to play golf. I like to go to the pool. I love the beach. Take a lot of cruises. I like to be outside. I just do. I've always enjoyed that. And so, eventually I'm going to have some well-earned wrinkles because of the fact that I'm just out in the sun a bunch. And I put on sunscreen, things like that, of course. But, I'm going to be I'm going to be more wrinkly than some of y'all are going to be because I am outside a lot. Let's see what else. Scott Gentry says, my hair turned gray, then it turned loose. It kind of reminds me of my grandfather. He used to always say that. He would rather his hair turn gray than turn loose. So, Scott, that is a joke I heard a lot growing up, for sure. John Paul Williams, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Jonathan Moore says he doesn't know if I want to come here today. What have y'all been doing over here? John Benton says that Kirby moved Raiola to Buford just so he could break the Gwinnett curse. Maybe that's the case. And you better believe, I think we're going to dive into this Gwinnett curse thing more if Bolden goes a different direction. Alan Verbanchik says he's been here since the start of DawgNation. Alan, that's awesome. And I certainly recognize your name as having been here for a very long time, so I really appreciate that. Steve Shaffini, thanks for the kind words there as well. I appreciate that. Let's see what else. Miriam Corbinici Murphy talking about the fact that I now have a middle schooler. Yeah, that's really weird. So today I take my son to school, and so we drive past our elementary school where my daughter still goes. So we drive past there, and my wife also subs. She's a substitute teacher, and so she's subbing there. My daughter's there, and for a long time they've all just gone to the same school, right? And now it's like you drive past there and you take a right and go to the middle school. And I asked my son today, I was like, does it seem weird not going to school there anymore? And of course he's, he loves the fact that he's in middle school. And I was like, nah, doesn't seem weird at all. But it seems really weird to me. My wife said it seemed really weird because, we just had our first day. And so it's like that thing where you see both kids kind of walking in together and, beginning of the school year is emotional time. Everybody kind of shares the pictures of the first day of the school, on the porch. And obviously Georgia's, even some of the pictures it does kind of, has some fun with that sort of picture concept. But that is an emotional time, man. John Benton says, ever since the George Pickens flip, I've been less stressed out about big recruiting decisions. Kirby's so much going on behind the scenes. Yeah, listen, I think that's really important to keep in mind here. As John said, I don't know that the intensity of the curiosity around the Bolden decision has anything to do with it being a make or break for Georgia, because Georgia's response to all of it. Georgia lost, Marcus Riddick, you had Justin Williams, you got all the, it's like Georgia always has a very strong response seemingly to whatever, happens around, these various recruitments. That always seems to be the case. That Georgia's going to be set up for success whether Bolden comes here or not. That's 1,000,000% true. But I think the question sort of is, what does Bolden's announcement say about recruiting? It either says something really positive for Georgia, which is no matter how much the NIL stuff seems to want to change, Georgia can still be Georgia. Georgia can still remain competitive, selling what Georgia wants to sell to its recruits. Or if the opposite were to happen and a lot of well-established relationships are trumped quickly by, kind of some flash and dash from a particular recruiting weekend, that sort of says something too. Now, what it says is not, oh gosh, Georgia's threatened, but it does say college football as we know it's now a good bit different. And that's just information, right? It's not the kind of thing to get panicked about or whatever else, but it would be information that we would need to process. If 16 visits and a close relationship with Kirby Smart is not enough to equal a recruitment, then it's time to point out that the world we live in has now greatly changed. And that's all that will be. That's all it will be. Let's see what else. Let me go to DawgNation.com here for a moment. DT in here giving me a hard time. Let's see what else. SEM Dog says gray hair and insanity are both hereditary. You get them both from your kids. I think that's probably true. That's pretty good stuff. Cam Hasty says Nick Saban bought out the dark copper Krylon at the local Ace Hardware. That's really funny, Cam. Richard D says, with Nitro Tuggle not going to Buford, how difficult would it have been to get him into with Nitro Tuggle not going to IMG, how difficult would it have been to get him to Buford? I kind of wondered that too, Richard. Not necessarily about Buford so much, but just so a lot of you maybe heard this. We talked about this on Monday, that Tuggle kind of found out that IMG, to me, if we had more time, I guess I would have asked Jeff about this. To me, the situation does not make IMG Academy look great, to be totally honest with you, but I also know zero about this story. IMG, according to Tuggle, they got new management, and all of a sudden now they're not accepting what I guess is sort of a partial year student in the case of Tuggle. I guess that's what that was. So Nitro thought he was going there, now he's not. Nitro's a wide receiver, Georgia commit, as you know, who has shot up recruiting rankings. The perception of Tuggle is far different now than it was at one point in time, and that's to his credit, of course. And if you're playing in a place like IMG Academy, that has a chance to continue. You get that really, strong attention because you're playing the national schedule and you have a chance to really skyrocket up the boards even more, which Tuggle may still do, but now he's moving back to his original home in Indiana, And you might expect some of that to just sort of slow down because there will be less attention paid on him in Indiana because people don't really look at Indiana high school football very closely. Basketball maybe, but football not very much. So to Richard's point, I had kind of wondered that a little bit of, not necessarily Buford, but should he go somewhere else? Like, instead of going to IMG, I'm sure there are plenty of places that would potentially take you. And I guess in Georgia, they're going to want you to make a bona fide move, so maybe that's a little bit inconvenient. Maybe that's why he's going back to Indiana. But I had kind of wondered if Tuggle would consider playing somewhere else other than IMG Academy. Randy Hall calling – there you go. There you go. That's me with Ryan Day's hair. That's pretty funny right there. That's pretty funny. Pretty funny. That's also an example of, much like my hair has kind of fluctuated in the direction of gray, my weight's also kind of fluctuated a little bit too. I'm a little thinner now than that picture. There you go. Now that's the Ryan Day beard. That's full-on Ryan Day right there. Jet black beard, just ink-stained hair. I mean, there you go right there. Just a ink blot of hair and beard. Very funny, Michael Carville. That's very, very well done. DT calls Kendall Milton a surprise player, saying he's going to be healthy and a beast this year. I'd certainly love to see that be the case. That'd be certainly fun if it is. And Randy Hall mentioned Darius Smith, a guy that we've loved here for a while. I like the idea of that long-bodied pass rusher getting his chance. That could be a lot to deal with. Bob Zamblin's enjoying the new DawgNation website. Bob, I'm happy to hear that. Really, really glad to hear that for sure. AJ Ferraro says, how about a health update on the offense? Says, do you think the interior defensive line or corner opposite Laster is the biggest question on defense? I think, first of all, on offense, I think the most significant injury right now is to Branson Robinson. I think it impacts your running back rotation. And beyond that, I think that Georgia's probably pretty healthy here. I think the Robinson injury impacts you some there on that. So that kind of changes the nature of that running back position, I believe, at least a little bit. I'm going to rank cornerback above defensive line right now in terms of a bigger question for Georgia because Kirby Smart said himself the other day that one of the areas in which he wants to see improvement is with the pass defense, especially late in the season when Garrett Nussmeier had plenty of success. Obviously, Ohio State, C.J. Stroud had a huge game against Georgia. Big pass defense performances in the biggest games you play. Georgia needs more of that, and obviously the cornerback opposite Kamari Lassiter is going to be important there. Dalen Everett's probably the favorite. You continue to hear positive buzz about Julian Humphrey. So that could be a fun competition and a fun battle, but an important one. The defensive line to me is one of those areas in which I still expect Georgia. I think Pro Football Focus ranked him as the best defensive line in college football. I still expect that to be true, but it is going to feel different. 2021, you had 3 eventual first-round picks playing as starters in that defense. I guess Jalen Carter too, so you had a total of 4. But last year you had Carter when he came back to full health as just an absolute game wrecker among the very best players in all of college football. This year it's a little bit more of a rotational, I guess, complementary collection of players. Maybe a future star emerges like a Jordan Hall possibly, but the Brinsons and the Zion Logues and the Nazir Sackhouses and the Tyron Ingram Dawkins, a little bit more of just sort of a rotational group maybe, but absent the big-time star, still I think very capable of getting it done. So to me, defensive line, even without the obvious future first-round pick, is probably more of a given and a guarantee right now than the cornerback opposite of Kamari Lassiter. So cornerback becomes a bigger question, but a really fun competition between between Dalen Everett and probably Julian Humphrey, Nyland Green, of course, too, maybe. Good group competing right there. Rambo on the subject of Marvin Jones Jr. Yeah, Jones Jr. is a guy that I've talked up before. Those second-year players, I think, are really fun. And Jones Jr. is healthier now than he was then, for sure. Paul Moon says you don't hear as much about Nyland Green. Humphrey's apparently bulked up. Yeah, it seems like the best I can tell, the buzz around Humphrey's probably a little bit more positive. And for a while there, I thought it was pretty quiet on the Julian Humphrey front. It seems like that's changed, within the last few months. It feels like you hear more about Humphrey, whereas, when he first kind of came in, he was kind of in that group to me with like Slim Singletary, who you never heard about, never heard one word about, and now he's gone. Humphrey was kind of, sort of quiet too for a while, but obviously not quite as quiet anymore. Nature Gator says, have you noticed the culture change at Florida? No talking, just working, making golden shoe material tougher for you. I'll be fair about that. That's interesting to see. Somebody shared something with me the other day where Austin Armstrong was kind of saying some stuff. You got to be careful with him, Nature. That's a bright young coach. He was going to be on the Alabama staff. That's a guy who may have very bright future in coaching, but he's young. He's young. So the idea that Florida's buttoned up, more professional, could be true. Perhaps that's true. A little harder, as you said, to get the certainly Billy Napier doesn't give you as much of that. The golden shoe style material could be the case. You just better hope that your very, very young defensive coordinator doesn't embarrass you. Some antics on the sideline, spring game. That's kind of a back of the house sort of type deal. To me, Austin Armstrong still sort of feels back of the house, type to me. So we'll see. We'll see. And when I say back of the house, I mean like at a restaurant, there's some people that you want up there at the maitre d' stand. There's some people you want back there, in the kitchen. Like, a little bit different, right? Some people are sort of back of the house type guys. And Armstrong, the defensive coordinator, sort of feels like a little bit of a back of the house type guy to me. Let's see what else. DMart42 also on the subject of the Humphrey, Everett, Nyland Green competition. Yeah, I believe the Green's in the mix there on that. Yes, and obviously don't forget Nyland on the great punt by Thorson in the Tennessee game a year ago. It was Green who got down there and kept that thing in bounds. So obviously he paid off pretty well there in that particular spot. Kirby's Belt says Florida's defensive coordinator should be good in a few years to come. Yeah, bright coaching prospect. I mean, I'm not a liar. I'm not going to tell you something that's not true. Obviously a bright coaching prospect. This is a guy that Nick Saban was going to have as one of his position coaches here this year. So, I mean, clearly this is a coaching prospect of note, no doubt about that. But he is very young right now. Now, when Georgia, had Glenn Schumann, things like that, some guys, just because they're young doesn't mean they can't be great. But that's one of those things worth watching. Florida could have a good defense. I don't believe Florida's going to have a good offense. I don't. They could have a pretty good defense, and Armstrong could be a reason why. Because I do think one of these days Florida could be glad they have it, but there could be some growing pains here right now, especially when it comes to sort of antics and things like that. All right, last comments we're gonna go. Alan Verbanchik, just like me, calling for those 45 to 50 sacks. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Scott Gentry says the smack talk is coming more from Tennessee this year with no basis for any of it. Yeah, that sounds like Tennessee right there. Unwarranted confidence. If there was any team that had that as a hallmark of their fan base, it'd be those Vols for sure. What else? Jacob O'Neill says close to a 2-hour show. Yeah, when you factor in the first and 15, we're there right at 2 hours. We're also getting ready to get off. Marvin Roach says Tennessee fans the most arrogant fans in the country. Pretty close to it. Jerry Popham and Miriam Corbin talking about some old days in the school system. That's fun to think about. Fun to think about for sure. Sometimes when it comes to like the conversations back and forth, I have a hard time telling who's talking to whom. Like, in other words, is it person A responding to person B or person B responding to person A? Sometimes I have a hard time with that, but nice to see the fun conversation taking place. And then finally, at DawgNation.com. Richard D says, I chose Buford because Nitro's pushing Ellis at IMG. Imagine him pushing. Yeah, you're right, Richard. That's a good point. If you did have Nitro at Buford, you'd have some pretty good battles going on in practice every day. There is no question about that. AJ Ferraro is talking about how Jalen Carter, he says, I already knew he was dominant, but I didn't realize he was unstoppable. Reminds me of Aaron Donald. Yeah, some of the stuff that he did, I believe that, and I hate to say this because it's like choosing between your children sometimes, but of all the players that have played on the Georgia defense the last 2 years in the national championship season, I do believe that Jalen Carter's the best. And I hate to say that in comparison to a healthy Nolan Smith or obviously Jordan Davis or a first-round number 1 overall pick like Trayvon Walker. Or, I mean, so many names you could mention. I believe that Jalen Carter's the best player to have played on this defense the last 2 years. I do. I really do. And Georgia's obviously going to miss him. I think there's a way. It's like you just got to have great. It's like you don't have to have a defensive lineman as good as Jalen Carter, but you've got to have somebody on defense somewhere as good as at least approximating that. And I think that Georgia has a chance to have that. But Jalen Carter is amazing, an amazing, amazing player. Anything else? Paul Moon says the common theme was that if Carter didn't feel like being blocked, no one was going to block him. Yeah. I mean, there were moments in which he was just unstoppable. The Tennessee game is the most fun one to me, anyway. I know he threw Jaden Daniels over his shoulder, but what he did in the Tennessee game is just obscene. It is just obscene. Let's see anything else. Christopher Rules checking in from San Diego, California. Christopher, glad to have you as a part of the show. We obviously miss you here in Georgia, but glad to have you tuning in way out there in the Golden State. Appreciate that. B.A.'s Tie Stone Cold Style checking in. All right, we got to go, y'all. It is just as late as can be. All right, y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you tomorrow night, some form, some fashion on video. We'll talk about the Bolden stuff then. And hope you all are just getting ready for a great weekend. Then back here Monday, reacting to it all. We also got Corky Kell luncheon on Monday, too. That's going to be fun. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Also, check out R.S. Andrews online for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Make sure you check out R.S. Andrews today. You can find them there and get that air conditioning unit tuned up if you need to. And we'll see you Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Talk to you then, everybody.